Hey everybody, it's Sam over at Scorpio Rising Astrology. I wanted to make a video on the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction because everybody keeps asking me, and it's time that I weigh in my 2 cents now that Jupiter is officially into Aquarius. So what does all of this astrobabble mean, right? There are a lot of internet articles that are claiming some pretty big stuff, but what does all of this mean both from an astronomical and an astrological standpoint? So we'll start with the astronomy. And I've linked below to an article from NASA, and I'll quote from that real quick. What makes this year's spectacle so rare then? It's been nearly 400 years since the planets passed this close to each other in the sky, which was back in 1623, and nearly 800 years since the alignment of Saturn and Jupiter occurred at night, as it will for 2020, allowing nearly everyone around the world to witness this great conjunction. So here, I know if you're on social media at all, you've probably heard 800 years, right? Technically, it's only been 400 years because it happened during the day, but because Jupiter and Saturn, as part of the traditional planet schemes, are stars, moving stars, visible only at night, we couldn't see the Great Conjunction last time that it came around. So technically, it's only been 400 years, not 800 years, but this star event will only be able to see it within the 800-year mark. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that Saturn and Jupiter actually conjoin every 20 years, right? So a Jupiter and Saturn conjunction isn't out of the norm, actually. What is out of the norm is their proximity, their closeness, right? So every 20 years, Jupiter and Saturn move into the same sign, but they don't necessarily align like they will this year. That alignment is pretty powerful. Again, when we think of cycles and generations and timelines, it means that we're on the cusp of something big. What that bigness will be, astrology tends to get a little bit vague about, but we can delve into some of the symbology and really start to look at planets, signs, and your own personal houses to figure out what that means collectively. So now that we have the astronomy out of the way, let's go into the astrology. So first we need to understand Saturn, right? Saturn is the planet of restriction, of density, of karmic life lessons, right? Is a tough cookie Saturn, known to bring about the infamous Saturn return every 28 to 30 years. In a natal chart is a planet of very often hard and difficult growth, but the type of growth that forges you into the person that you're supposed to be, right? Without Saturn's restriction, we wouldn't be able to enjoy Jupiter's expansion. So that's kind of one quick way to think about Saturn and Jupiter respectively, is Saturn makes things restricted and hard and difficult and gives us our trials, right? Whereas Jupiter gives us our expansion and our delight and our reward, right? But you can't have the sweet without the sour, yeah? So the fact that they are conjoining represents this kind of merging of ideas, this merging of sweet and sour into a perfect blend, an aha moment. But what we need to delve into is the idea of Saturn cycles and Jupiter cycles, right? Saturn has actually been in a point of strength over the past 2 years. Saturn has been in Capricorn, his home sign, since January of 2018. That's 2 years almost that Saturn's been in Capricorn, ruling over that domain, yeah? Saturn will be moving from the cardinal earth sign of Capricorn into the fixed air sign of Aquarius, which he also rules, right? So Saturn's actually going to be getting stronger, still maintaining rulership, but instead of cardinal earth, which is more about getting things done, max amount of profit with least amount of energy, very much about moving forward slowly over time, learning tough lessons, being stubborn, kind of curmudgeon-y, that Saturn and Capricorn at its worst, but very prosperous and very diligent and very focused at its best. Aquarius is the sign of the rebel, the scientist, the rule breaker, the mold breaker, somebody who studies the law to break it, right? Saturn studies the mountain to climb it. Aquarius studies the mountain to bulldoze it because it's in the way. All of that rigidity, all of that earth nature. Air doesn't like that. Air likes to skirt around things and likes to kind of open up its awareness, right? So Aquarius is that mad scientist archetype that plays with the laws of physics in order to break the laws of physics. And so Saturn will be moving from that dense earth into that really enlightened air, and that's going to take away a lot of pressure as well. Yeah. But all of this is happening at the same time that Jupiter is going through some pretty intense stuff. So Jupiter has been in the sign of Capricorn for about a year now, right? 9 months to a year is kind of Jupiter's cycle in each sign. Now, the problem with Jupiter being in Capricorn is Jupiter hates to be in Capricorn. Yeah. Each planet has signs that it rules. Yeah, like the moon rules Cancer. Jupiter specifically rules Pisces and Sagittarius traditionally. But Jupiter is also exalted in Cancer. Every planet has a sign of its exaltation, a sign it does really, really well in, a sign that it loves. Yeah? And Jupiter loves to be in Cancer. However, in our 12-wheel zodiac, Cancer opposes Capricorn. So if we think of Cancer as being the sign that Jupiter loves, then the opposite side of the wheel, the opposite side of the spectrum in Capricorn is going to be the sign that Jupiter hates. And what opposes Cancer but Capricorn, right? So Jupiter, as Lord of Abundance, as all that is kind of, because we're coming up to the holidays, kind of holly jolly Christmas, right? Or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or all of the or Yule, all of the celebratory happy holidays, right? That is Jupiter. All the food, all the drink, all the family, all the connection, all the loveliness, you know, chestnuts roasting on an open fire and all that jazz. When Jupiter moves into Capricorn, he's at his most impoverished. So we can think of Jupiter in Capricorn as being the king who is now turned into the slave, the servant, the beggar, right? Who has been ostracized from his exaltation and now moved into a point of greatly diminished power. And who has been the landlord of this whole process? Saturn. So because Saturn rules Capricorn and is very happy in Capricorn, Jupiter comes in and starts to rent an apartment from Capricorn, and Jupiter, who has never had to pay a bill in his life, you know, looks at Capricorn or Saturn, the landlord, and Saturn's like, sorry, rent's due on the 1st. I'm gonna evict you. You know, it's very hard knock life for Jupiter over the past year or so as he's been transiting Capricorn. It has not been pretty, right? And a lot of you have felt that restriction, that sense of, you know, no matter where we turn, there's not enough, right? Jupiter in Capricorn is the essence of not enough, especially when being ruled by Saturn. Now Saturn moved into Aquarius, and we've been waiting for Jupiter to move into Aquarius and out of the sign of his detriment. And so he will on December 19th. Yeah. Now what's interesting about the conjunction on the 21st, right? And all of this context that I'm giving you background wise is Saturn will be in Aquarius, still ruling Jupiter. Jupiter will be less impoverished, right? Jupiter will be out of his slump, which is good, yeah, but still ruled by the Lord of Restriction, yeah? It'll be a more airy, inspired mental rulership, right? And so the way that I've kind of coined this transition in my own head is we're moving from a jailer-jailed situation, whereas Saturn is the jailer and Jupiter is the imprisoned, right? Or master-slave type relationship, into master-apprentice, right? So we have still that lording over that Saturn is going to be presiding over. But Jupiter will be freer to do what he feels is right. Yeah. And that's going to be really, really helpful for Jupiter. It's not going to release the bonds entirely, but it will give us, you know, Aquarius being an air sign, some breathing room. So the conjunction is the meeting of the minds, the understanding that, hey, Saturn in Capricorn wants to keep everything underneath its thumb to make sure that nobody uprises and causes a fuss while Saturn in Capricorn is trying to pursue success, right? Control is Saturn in Capricorn. Saturn in Aquarius is realization. It's tinkering over time. It's understanding that, hey, instead of keeping this person locked into a cell, we can collaborate. And they might not necessarily know as much about this as I do, right? The idea of Jupiter not necessarily really ruling Aquarius, Saturn rules Aquarius, but Jupiter can still be of assistance, right? Instead of being locked away and out of the picture, Jupiter can participate in Aquarius. And that conjunction basically says, hey, you're out of the tough spot. Yeah, we'll loosen the shackles a little bit. You're still an indentured servant, right? It's still master apprentice. But the apprentice at least gets to open the books, learn a little bit of magic, mix a couple potions, and hopefully not turn into the Mickey Mouse version where the brooms go dancing, the waters go flooding, and the wizards has to come in and, you know, reprimand Mickey. But that's going to be the feel over the next 6 to 9 months as Jupiter navigates Aquarius until he hits Pisces, I believe around May. So that's my 2 cents. It's a lot of 2 cents, so maybe like $1.50 for the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. There's a lot of significance here. There's a lot of metaphor here. There's a lot of relief here, which a lot of people have been looking forward to. And I'm happy to deliver that news, but we're not completely out of the woods. It's nice that the noose has loosened, right? It's nice that we no longer feel so powerless, that we no longer feel so restrained by forces outside of our control, right? That we can now step up and start to become the masters of our own domain. But we are still learning the tough lessons that Saturn has to provide for us in order for us to be the person that we will become. Another analogy is ugly duckling, right? We're out of the egg, right? We are officially out of the womb and the tomb stage of that Saturn and Capricorn oppression. But now we are in the ugly duckling phase. We're still able to flap around and follow around, but we still don't feel like ourselves, right? We still don't feel at home. And that's because we're not a swan yet. Yeah. And that's something that we're going to need to come to terms with over these next couple of years and these next couple of cycles. So short term, great, lots of relief. Long term, we still got work to do. And that's all I have to say about that. I hope that you've enjoyed this explanation. Please let me know in the comments below. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out. You can always go to my website, ScorpioRisingAstrology.com, where I have consultations, recorded classes, and lots of other astrology info, like my daily posts on social media. And in the meantime, as I always say, may the stars be ever in your favor.